Hey, there's no need to rush. Kick back and learn about the spirit of radio. A couple years ago, when I started to listen to more talk radio, the only reason for that, and it was a positive reason, I guess, is the CD player in my car stopped working. I started listening to AM radio. I'm like,
you went like the exact opposite way. Like most people would look at a CD and they say, all right, well, let me find what music stations are good. You actually, like, to find the AM dial, you actually have to do physical work to try to find it.
The thing with London radio, though, is I find that AM news talk is far more entertaining and engaging with the listener as, say, a music contemporary, top 40 or rock. I hosted a comedy event in 2014, and I had you as one of the judges.
That's right.
Which was cool.
That was a lot of fun.
That was super fun. It was like 14 comedians, and we got a whole bunch of free food.
Yeah.
And it was the day before my birthday, my 30th birthday.
That's right. And which means I'm late on wishing you a happy birthday. So happy belated birthday. No problem.
I think you might have, but...
seems like something I would do on a text or something like that.
But yeah, we'll get to the radio stuff in a little bit. I just wanted to make sure I got this in here.
Interesting.
So you're from the Niagara area, right?
I'm actually born and raised in Scarborough.
Okay.
And then went to St. Catharines. I went to Brock University. And then I moved back to Toronto. I was working in Toronto for an insurance company, and my wife got a job teaching in the Niagara region. She was a girlfriend at the time, and I thought, well, if I want a future with her, we need to kind of figure this out. So when I started my broadcasting career, I went to Niagara Falls.
Tends to be the case in the industry as you jump all over the place when you first start out.
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it.
So the story I want you to tell... I think you told me when we had that Star Wars burger event that we have like every time the movie comes out.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's about your first date with your wife.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Now I got to go through the memory banks. Okay.
And it was a very interesting story in the Niagara region for your first date.
Yeah. That was a really cool experience. There's a gentleman out there who's one of my favorite people that I've ever met named Bernie Villamil. I was working mornings in Niagara Falls for a radio station there called 105.1 The River. And they had offered me a salary after I had finished my internship there, making a whopping $15,000 a year. That's $15,000 a year. So here I am, fresh out of school, trying to figure out bills and everything like that. And we wanted to kind of celebrate that we were in Niagara Falls together. I don't want to say venting it, but somehow it came up how I don't have any money or anything like that. And this guy, Bernie Villamil, says to me, oh, I got it planned. Man, don't even worry about it. Here's where I want you to go. And he hands me like this almost crudely drawn map of Niagara Falls. And if you've ever been to Niagara Falls, it can be very disorienting because none of the roads actually go north and south or east and west for a long period of time. There's a lot of fascinating reasons as to why that is. A lot of them follow old hunting trails and stuff like that. I mean, there's a giant road called Portage Road, which used to be a portage route. Somebody drawing a map for me very, very crudely doesn't look overly great. And the day we get there and it's pouring all day and everything, and I'm trying to follow this map, and it's, kind of 9:30 at night now, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like, this is it. I've read Bernie all wrong, and he's actually a murderer, and this is how I'm going to die. I'm leading Shannon to death. This is what's happening. You're kind of following the main road right by the falls, and then all of a sudden we're turning off to the sides, and now I have no idea where I am. And I'm looking, and I'm like, well, yeah, this kind of looks like the thing on the map. And I look up, and on the hill in the darkness, backlit, so he's just a shadow, is this guy in a trench coat. And I thought, oh, he's either going to bring me into a cult or he's going to murder me. That's what this is going to be. And so I kind of cautiously approach him, and we're kind of going up this slope, and he greets me with this big warm hug. And he was always one of these guys, just seemed way too happy to see everybody, and greets Shannon just kind of like the happiest guy in the world, and then leads us up into the back area. And I was like, what on earth is happening? And then we go up to a metal door, and he didn't even do like the knuckle knock, the one I mean, where you knock with your front knuckles.
Yeah.
He did like the pounding on the door with the side of his fist. We mean business let us in type thing. The door opens to this little almost cabin-like room where there's all of these newspaper prints off on one side.
Which is always a good sign.
I'm like, the visions of that scene in Beautiful Mind where they had like all these strings attached, and I'm like, what on earth is happening right now? And Bernie still hasn't told me what it is. And I'm like, what is happening? And this kind of older gentleman is perched there, and he's like, yeah, come on in, Bernie. And we walk in, and Bernie kind of says his thing, and he says, all right, I'll let you guys to your work. Al, Shannon, it was great meeting you. And then he leaves, and now I'm in this weird kind of cabin with this guy and all of these old clippings from papers, and nobody's told me yet what the heck is going on. And Shannon keeps looking to me for answers, and honey, I have no idea. And sure enough, this guy kind of does a quick hello and welcome and everything, and then he brings us through another door, and it's all of the old machinery that lights up the lights at night. So, like, when you go at night and you see all of those beautiful reds and whites and everything like that, we were there. And it was really cool. I kind of sat there, and he said, yeah, there's different patterns that you can do. And he showed us how to work all these lights. And it was just like a really, really cool experience of kind of sneaking in behind the falls and everything like that. We got talking, and it turns out they had all of these newspaper clippings up of pretty much anything that had to do with the falls themselves. And it was really interesting talking to this guy, because he said there's a specific year that they would report about people jumping, and they eventually said, no, we're not going to talk about this anymore in the newspapers because we feel like it's giving too many people ideas of how to end their lives. And they said it's become a real problem because there's casinos on both sides of the falls now. It's become a real problem because people lose all of their money on. Obviously, it's a tragic thing. I'm just laughing because it's like this. Oh my gosh, how did we not see this as a problem? This poor guy says, unfortunately, you look out and you see somebody doing it an awful lot, and holy smokes, what a dark job this is. Some of the folklore around the falls, it's apparently very haunted. There's UFO sightings apparently an awful lot. Then he started to talk about how there's basically the Loch Ness Monster, because they can't really find out exactly how deep it is right underneath the falls. And so there's these sightings of Loch Ness Monster. Some of the Maid of the Mist drivers kept reporting and stuff. So it was a really interesting tour. And afterwards, the guy signs like a certificate for you. And he's like, yeah, we turned the lights, and he hands it over to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. I said, do a lot of people do this? He said, not a lot of people come up to do it. If you're nice and we get talking, then yeah, sometimes we can make it happen. And a lot of MPs come back there, and I had gone back to reintroduce myself a couple of years after that, and he had said, oh, you just missed the prime minister by about 25 minutes or something like that. Shannon thought that I was just like some sort of a rock star. I think to this day, that might be the only reason she married me.
It could have also been the reason that she didn't marry you as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because up until the part with the lights, every single bit of that story just gets worse and worse.
You got to look at it from my perspective, too. I was driving this old boat of a car, and we're going down like some pretty narrow roads there. And I'm like, this is not even nice weather to be driving in. In ideal conditions, this car wouldn't be doing great. In this weather, we're crossing our fingers. Yeah, I thought for sure we were going to end up dead.
So you came to London after that, right?
That's right, yeah.
And what year was that in?
I was in Niagara Falls and then in St. Catharines. And so what year is it now? We're at 2020?
2020.
My guess would probably be 2008, 2010, probably around there.
Obviously, you worked your way up to having your own show, and you were also co-host with Mike Stubbs and Nick.
Right, yeah, Nick Chernowski.
Nick Chernowski, yeah. So when you first got to CJBK, of course, it was probably a smaller position. What was your first position at CJBK?
When I was in St. Catharines, they had put me on the news desk as weekend newscaster. And I was very upfront with them saying, look, I've got a background in news, which is to say I've got quite literally about 5 hours under my belt. It was never a goal of mine to be a newscaster. That was never my plan. And so in St. Catharines, the one thing that they said was, I tell you what, have as much fun as you want when you report on sports, but we need you to be straight when you're reading the actual news. I mean, that's fine, but they kind of came up to me afterwards. Your sportscasts, those are really good and they're personable and we really like them, but we can tell you shouldn't be a news person. It's jarring to go from one extreme to the other, and we need our newscast to be straight edge right now. And so the boss at the time, Madeline Hamilton, had made a change with the London radio station a few years before that took Mike's co-host then, Tom McConnell, and brought him over to St. Catharines. And so I was kind of the player to be named later, and Madeline got in touch with Barry and said, I hear you're looking for an afternoon producer. And Barry says, yeah, but we need a guy that can talk sports because we're sports oriented. And she says, I got the guy. His name's Al. We're going to send him over. And so Barry Smith was the boss at the time who interviewed me. The interview lasted 3.5 hours. And Scott, I'm not even kidding. At the end of it, Barry Smith says to me, well, Al, I don't know if this job is right for you, but we'll maybe try to find something for you down the line. I'll get in touch with Madeline. So I went back heartbroken. And 3 days later, I get the call and he said, no, I was just pulling your leg. We'd like to offer you a job. I owe so much to Mike Stubbs because he was just so great. I was coming in as kind of this piddly afternoon producer who liked to read about and analyze sports. And Mike just never once said, don't do that, this is my show, or anything like that. Mike Stubbs, he said, all right, let's give you a little window here to talk about sports. Okay, let's banter back and forth. And, the whole show was just designed to be a couple guys in a pub, really, is all it was supposed to be about. And eventually it was kind of like, all right, well, Mike's going to be kind of the sensible one, and Al, you're going to be the idiot guy with kind of far-reaching theories and eccentric and stuff like that. And yeah, it just kind of built and built and built, and we were a number one show for a little while, and then changes started to happen, and they needed warm butts and chairs, and so ended up changing to put me into my own show, and then everything started to kind of just get changed more and more over at CJBK.
Yeah, because eventually Mike Stubbs ended up leaving CJBK for another station, and that's when it sort of solidified your show with Nick as your producer.
That's right, yeah.
And that's sort of where I jumped in the last year or so that Mike was there, into you and Nick running a show. And with the sports angle, it was really cool for you because you got to have cool opportunities like doing the Knights games, right, and also the London Majors announcing as well.
It's funny, the radio world in London, and I don't want to get overly radio political or badmouth anybody because I have no bad blood towards my former employers at all whatsoever. But it was interesting because when I first moved to London, the first thing that I did was I sat down with Mike and I said, I've never seen a city like this for radio. And he was, well, what do you mean? And I said, it's weird. It's like this older crowd that is very conservative. But then you've got a younger crowd that is very, very liberal, and there's no middle ground. It feels like there's just those two extremes. But then on top of it, everybody is sports crazy in this city. Like I would tell them about St. Catharines, and I would say, over in St. Catharines, people kind of talk a little bit about the Toronto Blue Jays. People might talk a little bit about the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then because you were so close to the border, you might get a little bit about the Buffalo Sabres. But for the most part, sports was just kind of, yeah, whatever. That's going back a number of years ago, but that's the way it was kind of when I was there. And then the Buffalo Bills were another one. But outside of that, nobody really talked about it. And one of the things that Bell had, I shouldn't blame Bell, that was going on in the station was this move away from talking about sports throughout the day for a number of different reasons. But I always found that kind of strange because I was like, the whole city here tends to talk a lot about sports. I don't know if that's the right thing to do, but it really worked out, like you said, in my favor because Mike was going to do a post-game show, but they needed time to set up. So there was going to be kind of a half hour of me saying, hey, here's what else is going on tonight, and here are the NHL scores. When the London Lightning guys needed somebody to kind of hype up the crowd, they were actually doing a lot of advertising with Chorus. And so they wanted to make sure that because they didn't buy any advertising with our radio station, that we still talked about it. So that was why I got that job, I think. And then that job kind of landed me stuff with the London Majors because the London Majors were looking for people. So yeah, the sports side in London embraces sports in general, that it's very, very local stuff, right? They go to the London Knights, the London Majors, the London Lightning. And then on top of that, you've got people that are interested in the Detroit Lions. You got people interested in the Buffalo Bills. You got people interested in Blue Jays baseball. You got people interested in the Maple Leafs, the Detroit Red Wings. It's really quite amazing to follow it all.
Yeah, London is good for that. One or two key memories that I remember is the Memorial Cup win, which I believe was 05, right? 2005.
That would be right, yep.
And everybody was downtown in front of the market and the then JLC. It was just a packed crowd. Me and my friends had climbed the wall that was running parallel to Talbot and just standing on top of the wall just in a sea of people. And then the other memory is the 2010 Olympic men's hockey win, where everybody just pooled into downtown from everywhere. Just sort of, there was one crowd marching south on Richmond, and then there was another crowd of people marching north going down Richmond, and we all just sort of met up with each other in front of Joe Cool's, and it was crazy. And I get what you're saying about how this town loves sports, and I sort of see what they're coming from about not being able to talk about sports like the whole day, because a lot of the listeners might not be as well versed in sports as some other people. I'm kind of one of those where I don't know a whole lot about sports as far as like stats and numbers and the draft. And to me, it would seem like it would be very difficult to continually talk about sports for the whole day, because there's not really a whole lot of new developments in sports like on a day-to-day basis, other than like trades or injuries or game results.
The guy that was kind of put in charge of making all those changes is a very nice guy. He was the program director at the time, Scott Simpson. Scott had to make all of these changes, and I really felt for the guy, because at the time they kept saying, well, you got to let all those people go. By the way, here's all the programs you need to put in. Wait a second here. You guys are giving me less money but wanting more people. This is a wrong equation here, guys. I think we were out for a coffee or something like that. We were just talking about the lack of sports, and he knew it was no secret I was kind of on the more pro sports side. And he said to me, but look at it from a person who doesn't like sports. If somebody doesn't like sports and all you're doing is talking about sports, they're going to change the dial. But somebody who likes sports is going to say, all right, well, you know what? I'll put up with this political interview or whatever. I'm still getting informed, but sports will be coming up at whatever time. It was kind of a really eye-opening moment for me, just to kind of say, oh, yeah, you know what, you're right. You can really overdo it on something and really alienate a whole group of people versus where you're holding on to everybody, right? Which sounds to me kind of like the camp that you would be in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I sort of listen to it more for like the talk part, like the interviews and like the political stuff, even though I'm not really into that much anymore.
You had some great analyses, though, when you would call in. You had some great stuff. I used to really enjoy those calls.
I really liked the vicarious involvement I had with CJBK. You know, when you chalk it up to things, it was really just, you know, someone that emailed or called or texted in. But I really felt like I was sort of like a subsidiary character with the station, especially with Tom's show too, simulcasting into our listening area from CKTB in St. Catharines. So I had his show in the morning that I would fuck around with. And then I'd have your show, and then Andy, who I loved fucking around with. One of my favorite things to do to Andy Udman, and you and Nick would both message me saying, please stop.
You're breaking his brain. Stop doing that.
Is I would take a movie reference and reframe the movie reference into the topic that Andy Ubman was talking about. And then he would read my email or text and have no fucking clue what he's talking about.
Right.
Like, I think one of them was like Home Alone. He was reading the email like they were real people, but he didn't get the movie reference.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I felt badly for Andy on a lot of things that came down to pop culture. This is not unique to Andy. What day is today's Monday? So it would have been Friday of last week. I ran into Pete James, the godfather of sports.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And him and I were talking just about this. And we were saying, anybody in radio that has been in, you get used to kind of like there's that window where you got most comfortable. And it's very difficult to adapt outside of that window. Like, I always felt bad because a lot of these guys that were in the analog world, for example, just couldn't swing out of that analog world and just even understand digital. It was just too far out of that knowledge, right? And I always felt bad, like there's a lot of pop culture references. You know, the reason that you listen to Andy is because it was an opinionated conservative talk show host that was holding people accountable, that was getting people riled up. And he'd be the first one to admit, you know, hey, this is what I'm going to say because I know it's going to get you mad. I'm going to say this and it's going to rile you up. But when it came to pop culture, there was stuff going on that he just didn't understand because it's not something that he was comfortable with. So there was like a lot of times I can remember him doing interviews and I was just feeling bad. And I'm like, oh no, he doesn't quite understand this concept. And if I was working as a producer, I'd kind of slip in just so you know, this is the reference of what's going on. But you would send those emails and we would have to kind of, because you went, what was the brick wall, right? That was the brick wall. And it was hard. Brick wall, stop. You're breaking Andy. Stop it. You're gonna
That's why I really liked doing that, because I eventually started to liaison with every host. The morning show, Tom's show when it switched over to his, and like Tom and Greg coming down to the ale house every Christmas and talking to the listeners. It was a really cool like number of years where I was having a lot of fun, and then everything just went to shit.
Well, yeah, it's really interesting. And again, I have no ill will towards my employer, and I have to say, I know everybody wants to badmouth, in particular Bell, and when Bell took us over and all of these changes and everything. And I have to say, I didn't agree with all the changes, but it was their money. They're entitled to do with it whatever they want. They were never late on a paycheck with me. I resigned rather than got let go. So I didn't have to do the whole, how much are you paying me on my way out type thing. But but there's definitely, if I'm being very blunt, London is kind of a forgotten city in a lot of business plans. And I kind of got that impression that Bell was looking towards, what did they used to call it? Oh, they had like an acronym, and it was made up of cities like Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto, Montreal. They had some sort of an acronym. They were getting lots of money, and we were kind of looking, going, hey, what about us? And they're like, well, we're going to fire that guy so that the other people can have money. And that's the way that it very much felt. And I have no idea if that's accurate, but within Bell, that's kind of what a lot of us inside the building were starting to worry about. Was we started to feel, oh my goodness, is this a situation where we're just kind of donating our skills so that we can build up Toronto, for example, or build up Edmonton or something like that? And I mean, talk radio just cannot be done cheaply. And radio doesn't make, especially talk radio, doesn't make the money that it did 30 years ago. No, it just doesn't. And so it was actually funny. Mike Stubbs and I were talking a little while ago, and we were lamenting because we said, we did a show that was basically a podcast, but it was before podcasts were a thing. I forget what he referenced, but he said there's YouTubers who basically did our show and made millions of dollars off of it. And he said the problem was we were just 5-10 years ahead of our time, maybe. And like I said, if radio was making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year more than it was when I was a part of AM Talk Radio, then it probably wouldn't have changed. But unfortunately, the business model just changed so drastically, especially with CJVK being the juggernaut it was, with Steve Garrison in the morning. And, you had a 3-person morning show host with Ryan Spence, who's probably the most likable person in all of Southwestern Ontario, for crying out loud. And then that went right into Andy Oudman, which was a #1 show. After Andy Oudman, we had Dr. Joy Brown. For a couple of hours. Way
before my time.
Yeah. But then that switched to the Dan Patrick Show, and then Mike and I would come on in the afternoon, and it just seemed like CJVK could do no wrong at the time. And Steve's numbers were beyond incredible. They were just enormous. The House of Cards started to fall. They need another couple bucks here. So I still don't know entirely what the story was with Pete James, but I know that he moved on, whether he was pushed or whether he walked away. I still have no idea what the story was there, but that saved them a couple bucks and got them a little while. And then Ed Wilmot moved on, and all of a sudden you're looking and saying, well, it's just not the same show anymore. And then, of course, Steve was let go. trying to remember whether he was let go or whether he eventually just got so frustrated and left. Yeah. From the inside, looking at what happened, all of it happened so fast.
Yeah, I can imagine it.
Going, what happened right there?
I could imagine it seemed like a sinking ship from the inside.
What a great analogy that is. It more just kind of felt like everybody was just scrambling and oh my gosh, there's an open chair. All right, it's a race to see who's going to sit in it so that there's at least somebody in there for a little while. And then all of a sudden they're telling me I'm doing news. And I'm like, I don't think you guys want that, man. Yeah. I'm not really a newsy guy. I'll do it, but I don't think you guys really want that. But when you were kind of a really big part of the show, the power that radio station had was really, really enormous.
Especially when it teamed up with CKTB, because then you gained both markets.
Right.
And there would be like that rivalry between Niagara Ice Dogs and the London Knights people. Yeah,
and of course, Tom McConnell kind of being caught right in the middle of it. And
because he's from London. And
and he's an interesting guy to have kind of doing both markets as well, because, and again, it shows the uniqueness to me in London's market. St. Catharines itself is a small town, but St. Catharines is part of the Niagara region. So if you ever go to the Niagara region, it's really quite an interesting area to start getting involved with, because at times you want to say, oh, I'm part of a small town. Niagara Falls? No, we're Thorold. Oh, yeah, you're from a small town? No, life of the city, we're right near Niagara Falls. And it's kind of like this weird amalgamation of all these little places. So it's kind of like this small city, big city thing. And then you come into London, and it's really kind of this island where you're not really associated with Toronto or Detroit or Niagara Falls or anything like that. So it was really quite interesting that they're continuing to try, I guess, to match up all of these different cities, because London, to me, has always been a unique city that really is unto its own.
Right. Because if you go back to the history of radio, London was a huge city. You had CFPL. What was 1410?
I'm trying to remember. CKSL.
CKSL. You had CKSL,
yeah.
And then eventually CFPL FM.
Right.
You have the university station. You had Fanshaw's station back when it was a rock station. And it's always seemed like London had not a large market, but not a little small market. It was perfectly right in the middle, with the Blackburn family setting roots here and setting up their empire. It was just a huge city for media, and that's why it was a shame to see how it turned out. And I know that you won't speak ill about your previous employer. That's totally understandable, and you don't have to comment if you don't want, but I think Bell absolutely destroyed that station. It's not Scott Simpson's fault. He was put in a very precarious position. But it's just that burn off everything that can save you money in the radio industry. I know it sounds sort of bitter, but when I graduated from Fanshawe and I went to Chatham to the Blackburn stations there, I worked there for 3 months as a copywriter, like a commercial writer, which is what my major was. And their producer left. So not only was I writing commercials for most of my day, but I would also stay behind after hours and produce the stuff that I had written, stuff that other people had written. It wasn't one of my majors or minors. My minor was announcing. But the point of the matter is I filled in as producer for a whole month while they got a new producer in. Then one day, before my 90 days was up, I got pulled in and was laid off.
Oh, jeez.
And it didn't have anything to do with my performance, because I was doing a job and then another job on top of that, just to sort of keep them afloat. And then one day before my probation, they cut me. And that's sort of what I learned from talking to other people too about the radio industry, is if they can save money, they will. And I do not blame them, because radio has had the shit kicked out of it for decades, and it's always survived, but it's getting to a point now where it might not, or it'll have to be something very different to save it, because you have podcasts, you have Spotify, you have satellite radio, internet radio. And
what the problem was with Bell, and I need to be very, very careful that I am not bad-mouthing CTV News by any stretch of the imagination, but to me, when they tried to gut our newsroom, when I say our, I mean CJVK, Well, don't worry, because we've got the CTV newsroom that you can rely on. To me, the biggest problem was they didn't seem to tell the CTV newsroom. And so we would be calling up people and we'd be saying, hey, look, I've got a 2:30 newscast coming up here, and I know you're at the courthouse, or I know you're at this event, and I need you to do a quick, no, I don't have time. I can't do this. I can't do this. And the marriage itself felt mostly mishandled. But then on top of that, anybody that's gone through a broadcasting program, the first thing they'll tell you is the strength of radio is the immediacy. If you can get somebody to talk to you, then you're live breaking the news. And the weakness of television is how difficult it is to get a story to air. Sean Irvin, I think a couple of nights ago, I saw him with 4 different interviews in 4 different places. Well, just think about how much time that is to put one story together. You got to first find the story, then you got to contact all these people, then you got to go to all these people, get the shots and everything like that. It's just not very timely to get all that information. And so to me, that was the biggest problem when there was this aligning of CTV News and CJVK, because they were both in the, quote, Bell family. It made it almost impossible for us to compete with CBC Radio plus Global, which was then Chorus, who had these actual bodies and reporters, even for crying out loud, Free FM. They could go out and get this immediate thing. We, being CJVK again, really lost a lot of the local identity. It was no longer CJVK able to be on its own. It was very much CJVK as part of CTV News. And the way that it often felt to us radio people was, okay, but the television needs to come first, and we'll kind of get you the crumbs afterwards. Once the tape is being edited, we'll see if the reporter can give you a call or something like that. To me, that was a really difficult way to try to put together a show and try to put together any information.
You got off the sinking ship and you found yourself in private education.
Yeah.
Tell me about, I know you're not with them anymore, but it just seems like it was a really cool experience. Tell me about the school that you were involved with after being in radio.
What ended up happening was, because I was working mornings at the time, morning news, and I was really, I was really unhappy there for a number of reasons. Number one, I'm not a morning person by way of just waking up, so that was a struggle. But there was a lot of times, like I said, that there was warm, there just wasn't enough warm bodies in the building to run it efficiently, and so there was times that I would have to be there for 3:30 in the morning, and there was nobody to run the infomercials for the afternoon. So all of a sudden now I'm working until 1 in the afternoon, all on air and crunching all these stories and doing all of this prep. And then, I got to come home, pick up the kids, try to get a nap in, try to get dinner started and everything like that. So I was trying to do something that kind of lined up my hours a little bit better with family life. And so I gave my notice, and I was going to go back to school to be an EA in the school boards. I was taking a child and youth care course at Fanshawe. And while I was there, somebody that I used on the air a number of times called me up and they said, I just heard you left radio. And this was kind of a funny story, because my very last day was December 20th or something like that. And it was like a weird day. It was a Tuesday. And I had an appointment up at Marymount up in the northeast end on the Wednesday. And I was walking back home and my phone rang, and it was Andrea, who owns Infinity School. I just heard you left radio. And I said, yeah. And she says, we're making some changes over at the school. Would you be interested in talking? And I said, you know what? I'm just on my way back from an appointment at Marymount. I've literally only got about 10, 15 minutes, so I don't know if now's the best time, but let's make an appointment. And she says, are you wearing a blue coat? I said, yeah, I am wearing a blue coat. She says, I live like 3 houses down from Marymount, and I can see you out my window right now. And I was, what? That's crazy. So I was like, all right, well, this is somewhat serendipitous. Let me stop on by. And so she said the weirdest thing. She says, I'm never home for lunch. My husband is never home for lunch. He's off today. I'm off today. And we both just we literally just said, when was the last time we had lunch together? And then you happened to walk by and we were talking about the school and stuff like that. So, so she runs a school called Infinity School. It's right in Wortley Village. It's the back half of St. James Anglican Church there. Bruce Street. The parking is on Bruce Street, and that's probably where I'm screwing it up. She called me up and she said, well, we don't have teachers. We have what are called guides. And it's a student-led environment. Your job is to guide kids into making good decisions, to help them make good decisions, to help them work hard on what it is, to set their own goals, a lot of social emotional learning workshops that you'll be leading and stuff. And so we'll give you all the information for the way that we do things. And so that way you don't need to get a teacher certificate. And it was an amazing experience. It was 2 years there that I loved. The kids were awesome. It was, at times frustrating because you have no control because you're not a teacher saying this is the curriculum. You're literally just kind of a cheerleader saying, come on, let's get through this. Let's get through it. And you see the decisions the kids are making. You're kind of like, I can't do anything. I just can't do anything. But then there was times where you look and you're like, oh, geez, like some of these kids that, the curriculum, and I'm not bad-mouthing teachers, obviously, in public school system by any stretch of the imagination. But some of these kids just don't know if you let the leash, took them off their leash, how far would they go? Or if they stumble, rather than kind of immediately rushing in to make things easier, what if you challenge them a little bit? What would happen? And we saw success stories like that all of the time. And it was really, really kind of powerful, especially with my wife being a teacher. It was really quite interesting kind of seeing how some kids, not all kids in that model, but some kids in that model would really succeed. It was really kind of cool.
Yeah, from what you were telling me about it, it really seemed like an encouraging place. Because it's like you just said, the kids were encouraged to sort of develop their own curriculum, their own projects that were along the lines of the direction that the school wanted them to go in. But it just seemed like a really interesting way for kids to learn, because I feel like not all kids, but most kids would be more confident in themselves if they were more part of the process rather than just learn this, regurgitate this, write this down.
Right. Yeah.
Here's your piece of paper. Hope you had a fun 12 years. Get out.
That's exactly. Yeah. The thing that we like to say is we're going to help you learn how to learn. I was never a terrible student by any stretch of the imagination, but I was definitely not an A student. You know that guy that kind of finds that happy medium between I've got the right grades that my parents will back off, but I'm also doing not enough that I'm going to be stressed. You know that guy? That was me.
That's
me. Yeah. Just a little bit above the phrase of C's get degrees. You know what I mean? Just barely above that. And it wasn't until well into university that it finally clicked on me how I learn, the things that I need to do. I had a university professor who said it to me, and halfway through the second year, he said, people are confused with learning. People seem to think that I'm going to say something, you're going to listen, and somewhere in the middle is this magical thing called learning. I remember that like just kicking me in the backside of the head is just like, that's right. Like we shouldn't just assume that I'm going to accept any of this. That goes against anything. And if somebody says something, I don't understand it. It's not okay to just say, oh, I've learned it. Somebody said it. I've got to figure out what's applicable about that. I've got to be more engaged and more active with this whole thing. So yeah, it was. That's kind of what we tried to do at Infinity School. Was we worked really hard on building relationships with the kids so that they knew to trust you as a guide, and sit down and say, okay, so I don't want you to learn 40% of this math. I want you to learn 90%. But don't worry, there's no test at the end of this. We're going to go at your own pace. But let's just figure this all out. Because, I mean, if you don't learn a math concept in grade 1, and all of a sudden you're being put into grade 2, and they're trying to build off that, then you're going to really struggle. So I really enjoyed that part of things, is just kind of finding where kids were at and saying, okay, what's the next step? Let's go. And I really, really enjoyed that part of it.
The big elephant in the room, of course, COVID and everything that's going on.
Have you heard about it?
Yeah. It's
COVID? Have you heard that?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was a scary time for sure when COVID first hit.
It just seems like with like Zoom meetings and the way that some kids are learning and some teachers are teaching. My ex, she teaches online sometimes to students in the school board from home. And with COVID, the huge cloud hanging over everybody's heads, even back then, like a couple of years ago, the Infinity School, I just seemed to feel like education was moving more and more towards private or a la carte.
Right.
Rather
a la carte. What a good phrase.
Yeah. I learned it in school.
During the 4 hours you were awake.
Yeah, exactly. Because like I had ADD when I was younger, and
Right.
so I was a distraction. And it probably wasn't until grade 11 when I started taking a program where I felt really comfortable, encouraged, I could shine, and that was broadcasting at Beale, which then led to radio broadcasting at Fanshawe. It was when I was engaged in something that I was really passionate about. The other subjects that I took at school, they improved as well because I had more confidence. And if you nurture that confidence in the student, it will help them learn in the learning style that they have. And it just seems like more and more people are going to move towards private education where they're still learning how to be, productive members of society, but it seems like they almost will have something extra to contribute to society rather than just a button, a chair, punching a clock.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. A lot of students that came in, for whatever reason, didn't fit in with the traditional school system. And there'd be some kids that come in and may have ADD or ADHD. And some people would say, oh, geez, you can't sit down and do this. But if you all of a sudden say to them, okay, tell you what, work for 20 minutes, then go run around for 10 minutes, then come back and work for 20 minutes and come back. And they learn not how to avoid ADD, their ADD, but how to work with it at times. There's a confidence build there that they can just say, I just need to figure out the right way of working and handling this, right? Talking with a friend of mine who said that she was dyslexic and nobody identified it until she said she was almost on her way out of high school. And again, I'm not taking a shot or anything like that, but she said it was remarkable making that transition from finishing off high school, going into university, because I had found different coping strategies, but now I knew what the problem was to actually get more specific with the coping strategies, right? I think that's really powerful. We might, in a public school system or a traditional school classroom, we might undervalue the effect of confidence and the springboard effect that could have into other realms of life for a student.
So now you are headed to Teachers College.
That's right.
Is it Alt House that you're going to, or?
No, you know what? It was interesting, the timing. So COVID happened, and unfortunately, I was told from Infinity School, enrollment's down too far. We've got to get rid of a salary, and we found a way for you to personally help out the school. That's going to be you. So unfortunately, I had missed all of the Ontario deadlines. And I was talking with my youngest son's former teacher, and I was just saying, it's a shame because I really was enjoying teaching, my version of it. And she said, oh, well, there are courses in the United States. And I said, well, yeah, but they're too expensive. And she goes, I wouldn't look into them. And so I went online, and there's a school called Medaille College in Buffalo that offers Teachers College for alternate weekends. So every other weekend, you're actually in class. And the rest of the week, you're able to work on some assignments, but it's made for people like myself who would need to find a job and work. The sticker shock is huge. It's not a cheap thing. But the thing that I was looking at, I was like, but if I was doing an Ontario Teachers College, it would be 2 years plus 4 days a week at this school. So I wouldn't be able to find a 9 to 5. Plus on top of that, at the end of it, if I didn't get into London, I'd be looking at driving all over the city once I was accepted, and I wouldn't even be able to be accepted until a year of September if I get accepted. So I call up this Medaille place, and the guy's like, yeah, this is what we do. He said, well, obviously you can't get over the border, so everything's going to be done online, but you are expected to be there online both days, and they're 10-hour days on Saturday and Sunday every other week. And it's been awesome. I've got the 9 to 5 where I can, the Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, where I can try to find work. I'm helping out a lot with the kids, making sure the kids are off at school. This year with COVID and everything like that, my wife had said, I'd really feel more comfortable if you were available because she's teaching high school math right now and all the changes and everything there that they're putting on her. She says, I just don't have time. If one of the kids is sick, I can't take a day off. And so it's been awesome kind of being Mr. Mom at home as I'm looking at laundry right in front of me that I'm going to be able to do as soon as we're done. But yeah, the Teachers College, the work, I work until after the kids are in bed until about midnight, but it's all done. And yeah, it's just been a really, really great fit by way of schedule and everything like that.
Yeah, I hope it goes well for you, dude. I'm excited
thanks,
for
man.
you. And it was really great talking to you, catching up.
The pleasure's all mine. If only there was a Star Wars movie that we could get together for, and a lack of COVID that we could all get together. Just so everybody knows, the best, and I'm trying to remember, it started off with however many years ago with whatever Star Wars movie was coming out. But Scott, you called up Nick Janoski and myself, and you said, yeah, like, why don't you come out with me and the guys? You were working for the movie theater at the time, and you said, I'll make sure you get us tickets, and we'll go out. And we had burgers over at the Works, which incidentally, that is the one thing, that was my favorite thing that Mike Stubbs and I ever did, was we had burgers named after us at the Works.
Oh, sweet.
And it was the funniest thing. It was timing. Mike and I were just shooting the breeze about our favorite burgers, and the Works was in Ottawa, and it was only in Ottawa. And I called them up, and I said, we're just wondering, like, all of a sudden we're hearing that you guys have a sign up there and says only in Ottawa for now. And like, what's with the for now? And then the lady said, well, we're expanding. What city are you in? And I said, well, me and the guy that are talking about it on the radio, we're in London. And she says, we actually have a grand opening tomorrow. Do you guys want to come and name a burger after you guys? And it was like another one of those weird timing things. And so Mike and I went down and we met Chris and, I forget the other guy's name. I'm drawing a blank. Who owned the Works, and we had a burger for the longest time called Mike and Al's Afternooner.
Oh, sweet.
And it was, yeah. But
it's a small world because I believe it was Chris. I think I knew him as East Coast, but I worked with him at the bar at Fanshawe when I was in school.
Oh, okay.
And then he became one of the people who ran the Works here in London. So, but what was on the burger that was named after you guys?
And again, they've changed the menu now, so I can't even remember what was on it. But it had the Southwest beach sauce and avocado, I think.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But it was great. But at any rate, you organized it, so we went and we had a burger, and then we went over to the theater to watch the movie. But you dummied us. You ordered a hamburger with all of the meats in it, and you finished it.
Because I am a professional burger eater. Yeah, I did that a couple of times. Like the last time I ordered it, the server, bless her heart, she was a sweetheart. I'm like, okay, I would like every kind of meat. And she's like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah. And the burger, so I want every kind of meat. I want avocado, I want bacon, and like waffle fries on the side. And it was like around $30 for the burger, for just the burger. And it was the best tasting money I ever spent, but I can't eat like that anymore, though.
I'm glad you can't eat like that anymore.
Yeah.
And the look on the waitress's face, and all of us at the table are, what are you talking about?
It was funny, her attitude and her voice. She's like, really? I'm like, yeah, really. I have money. I want to give you that money. Can I please have every type of meat on the burger? Like, I don't understand what's difficult.
Don't judge me, lady.
Exactly.
Don't judge me.
Don't look at me. It was really nice talking to you, Al, catching up. It's been a while, and I'm glad to hear that you're doing well in this crazy world that we're in, and I hope Teachers College goes really great for you, bro.
Thanks so much, man. I'm so happy to hear your voice again, and it was nice being on this side of the interview. Great talking to you.
You can check me out on Instagram and TikTok at Scott_loves_puns. Puns is with a Z. You can also find me on YouTube, Scott Loves Puns _ASMR. And you can also purchase my audiobook and new comedy EP for only $2 and $1 at swoaudio.bandcamp.com. Thanks for listening and have a good night.